morning, everyone. Dr. Chim coming to you after Creighton Falls at Marquette. 79-71 is your final tonight. Up in Milwaukee, I made the drive up from Chicago earlier today. Got to see the game in person. Pfizer, my first time visiting, actually. Very nice facility, of course. A little surprised at how small it plays. Doesn't feel quite like I shouldn't say it doesn't feel like an NBA arena, obviously. It's very nice. Class facility. Just, it plays smaller than I think it actually is. The lower bowl is significantly larger than the upper bowl, and that's one of the things I really like about some of these new arenas. Like KFC Yum felt huge. That upper deck felt like it was miles away from the action. So I really preferred this building, the feel of it, to that one. Good crowd size. I would call it pretty CHI-like in terms of atmosphere. Got going in its good minutes, but it was definitely an older crowd. Very standard Big East sort of crowd, I think it's fair to say. Wasn't the atmosphere I necessarily expected for 8 p.m. on a Friday against a conference rival. I think it's reasonable to call Great Marquette a rivalry, at least in early stages. Had a chance tonight, I think, to pick off a top 10 team on the road. That's the big takeaway from tonight. I don't think a lot of folks, if any, were going to go in predicting tonight as a victory. I think that would have been very optimistic. I think if you were going into this game looking for reasons for optimism for the Jays going forward, I think you found them. Because you held a top 10. I don't actually know where the AP poll is. I never really check up on that. Top 20 Ken Pom team on the road. Got them within 8 points. 5 points into the last minute. Missed shot, make shot here, there. It definitely wasn't the blowout that it felt like it was becoming there early in the second half. And that's kind of going to be the story of the game, unfortunately, is that, they call it the middle 8. The last 4 minutes before halftime and the first 4 minutes out of halftime really lost the game. And I think there were a couple, I always get shit on whenever I question a coaching decision, but I think it's fair to say I don't know if throwing the zone at them when we did was the best call. I thought things were going fairly well the couple of times we switched into it. I think it took us a little bit out of what we were sort of getting comfortable with, because it was a game where it didn't feel like we ever really got comfortable on defense until it didn't end up being too late, but what I think most of us would have thought was too late. The first maybe 10 minutes of game time were switching some screens, not switching others. It seemed like everyone wasn't quite sure who they were guarding when the rotation started. Maybe some changed game plans based on things they were doing that the players weren't completely caught up with. They just looked a little out of sorts, but it was kind of working in your favor because Marquette wasn't playing super well set up. They still, for the most part, had the right guys taking their open looks. Like if we were trying to pick who was getting the shot. Cam Jones starting 0 for 7 from the floor certainly helped. And it was just one of those things where, you felt early in that game we took a 7-0 lead, didn't hold on to it too long, kind of let them right back into it, couldn't keep them at arm's length. It felt like that was something you were going to have to do if you were going to pull this one off. And the first half as it went on, I felt okay about our half-court sets. We weren't turning the ball over nearly as much as St. John's, not nearly as much as I would have guessed. It was one of those things where coming into this game I had a little bit of optimism that we would be able to run our sets better because we had just played a game against a very similar attacking style of defense. And to be fair, it paid off, I'd say, a little bit. Steve, at one point, was 10-1 assists to turnovers, so that's a big bounce back for him. Fortunately, it was up and down again for him, though, because as soon as he got that back, the shot appeared to leave him a little bit. It was, I don't know if it was 1 for 12 or 1 for 13 if he got another one off there at the end of the game, but it was pretty brutal. And it's a take and a leave, right? Because you say, we're within, it's a 2-possession game with a minute and a half left on the road against a good team, and your best your best shooter shooting like crap. So you can take that as a positive and say, well, all right, you did enough the rest of the game to make it competitive, and if 2 or 3 of those shots go down, then you're really in business. If he shoots, even what would be considered a bad day for him, anything other than apocalyptically bad from outside the arc, and you're looking at a tie ball game going down the stretch or that. So that's good as far as reasons to be optimistic. However, you could take that on the other hand and say, yeah, you really want your senior guard doing a little better than that. And shooting, everyone sort of takes one perspective of the other. Is shooting something you can control or isn't it? At the end of the day, the game of basketball is about who is better at putting the ball in the hoop than everyone else. So I also have a tendency to give the benefit of the doubt on a bad shooting day and say, it's a make shot, miss shot game line that we all get frustrated with when coaches say. There's a reason they say it. If you're a metrically inclined fan, which I am, you know that happens. And it's just as likely that he goes, 8 for 12 next time out, right? Like, it's just as reasonable for that to happen as what happened today. Well, not 40, because you're shooting at a 40%, but you're not. Never mind. It's not a 50-50 proposition. I don't think I have to explain that. So the other hand is saying shooting is execution, and your best shooter didn't execute today. And that's the problem. I think you can also say you can blame the game sort of on as your best 2 players didn't step up where they're most needed, which is putting the ball in the hoop, right? If you're saying we're playing a fucking basketball game, put the ball in the hoop. Kalk and Ashworth left a lot of points on the board tonight. Ashworth, again, shooting from deep is more excusable, larger margin for error, way more likely to have a bad day than a good day, just the nature of taking those shots. You're 70% potentially breaking the record for best field goal percentage of all time, 7'1" center missing 7 or 8 bunnies that he probably converts 95% of the time. That's a different story, right? And it really was. Kalkbrenner probably missed 7 or 8 shots that any other day you expect him to make. You almost turn away when he's going up for those, right? The ball's going in, and it's something you can say, oh, we've taken it for granted that we just assume that he's going to make all those. Yeah, but he's a 5th-year player with a 70% field goal percentage, so he has proven that we can expect that. He'd be the first one to tell you that he had to have those today, and not only did he not have some of them, he didn't have any of them, right? He might have had 3 made field goals. A lot of his points came from the free throw line, and I also saw a lot on Twitter of people blaming the free throws for the reason we lost. I think you looked at the 3-point percentage first. I think we finished shooting 74% from the line. That's not bad for a college. I know we've come to expect a little better in the last few years, just having so many good free throw shooters on the team, especially last year. But I think everybody pretty much shot their averages today. Kalkbrenner was, I thought at one point he was 7 for 10, or 7 for 11, something like that, which is pretty much exactly his career average. Fred missed 1, Mason missed 1, no surprises there. I don't think Steve missed. So you pretty much got exactly what you would expect from the line. You could say free throws are free. They're not. They're not. You're going to miss the best players who aren't Stephen Ashworth will even miss them 10% of the time. Today we missed them 27% of the time or whatever it ended up being. So, no, I don't think you look to that. Having a great day at the free throw line is a great way to steal a game, but shooting your career averages from the line I don't think is something you're going to look at and say that's the reason we lost. Now, the reason we lost today was a lot of missed putbacks and then a couple of lapses where we started their breaks for them. Their set offense was nothing to write home about today. And that's sort of the Marquette we all expected to see at the start of the season. I'm not correct in the way I evaluated them preseason. I was picking them 4th in the conference pretty confidently, thinking that their ceiling wasn't a whole lot higher than that, whereas now I still think UConn might be the slight favorite to win the conference, but I don't know if Vegas actually agrees with me on that. I don't think they do. You're looking at a team that may very well be odds-on to win the conference. And part of the reason I didn't think that would be the case is because of what I expected their half-court offense to look like, which is a lot of what we saw today. And it's a thing, too, where we are at a disadvantage playing them because they'll play small on us. Defensively speaking, we're at a disadvantage, right? It's arguably one of the few games in your year where you're kind of like, man, I wish we had a different style of big man than Kalkbrenner, right? Now, obviously, in the aggregate, that doesn't pan out. But you look at this game, you say, well, you just throw somebody else on Ben Gold, and that's fine. Then they can't really do anything. And it's exactly this kind of game, unfortunately, where Kalkbrenner didn't give you a ton on the offensive end, and you maybe, like, I'm never taking Ryan Kalkbrenner off the first period. But there are theoretically better matchups for the way Marquette plays their offense than what we had today. You had Isaac Trout and Ryan Kalkbrenner guarding Cam Jones and Stevie Mitchell one-on-one. That's not to say like Stevie Mitchell's like a great scorer or anything. He did his job today. But the number of times Trout went one-on-one with Jones and did pretty well on him, I think deserves to be commended. But their half-court offense really didn't look like anything particularly special. It certainly wasn't blowing me away. It was a lot of iso ball. It was a lot of try and drag a second guy in and kick it to a three-point shooter that we were kind of leaving open anyways, to get a more of a rhythm look, I guess. And to credit their role players, they played their roles. They had some young guys knock down some shots. Lowry made, I think, a couple of shots. Royce Parham, I think, made at least 1 3, maybe 2. He also had kind of an accidentally scored a basket, one at some point. Cam Jones gets one blocked into the hoop. Those are points that maybe don't ordinarily happen, and if those points don't happen, we maybe win that ball game. So their role guys stepped up a little bit. I think we had a couple of guys step up too. I think Jemiah played a nice game. A couple of turnovers, a couple of bad turnovers in rough spots that started them on breaks, started them on runs. But overall, I think he handled the pressure fairly well. He drove to some spots at times. He's a fairly limited player. He's very athletic. He doesn't have a ton of skill around the basket, finesse around the rim. So he's got some, and he showed some of it off today. But, he got blocked by Gold on one of them. You say, all right, that probably shouldn't be happening. His game isn't driving to the hoop and touch passing around the basket, right? His is making an explosive move and scoring quickly, and he did that at times where we really needed it too. He was a catalyst for our comeback run there. So you like to see that from him. He had struggled a couple of games leading up to this. So nice to see him get involved again. I think Trout had a fairly nice game. Made a 3. A lot of guys missed a lot of threes, so I don't know if I can really hold that against him either. Played good defense for most of the game. I'm going to get to it, but I think it's fair to have questions about the way we rotated in this game, too. Green, he was so close to having a nice game. Missed a bunny or two. A couple of rebounds just sort of fell out of his hands. So close to having a really nice, really impactful game. 3 or 4 balls that either didn't bounce his way, slipped out of his hands, or he left just short that, maybe makes a difference in that game, but yeah, it's hard to complain. He gives the effort out there, and that was something that we needed at stretches in that game, because as the first half was rounding out, start of the second half, it didn't feel like we had a whole lot of effort on the floor. Thankfully, it came around pretty quickly, but it doesn't take much to lose a game on the road like this. McAndrew looked good early, didn't look as good late. A couple of missed box outs, a couple of nice box outs. He's a little limited on the ball, but he's also a little bit ahead of what you would expect from freshmen, so not gonna rag on him for that performance there. It was, you can call it up and down. An extra 3 here or there would have been nice, but again, you could say that for a lot of guys. Mason, oh boy. I don't know what it's going to take for him to start losing playing time, because if it hasn't happened by now, I don't think it's ever going to. And that's where I think you can start asking some fair questions. He played pretty well against St. John's, I think. He was at least on the floor while good things were happening. His plus-minus was pretty good in that game, as I understand it. But it was more of the same today. If you took that St. John's game out, you would say he's been on an awful stretch for a while now. And he just plays too many minutes for it to be that rough. And a guy who gets 2-3 shots a game, that's not enough for him to break out of it on his own, right? You know, it kind of is what it is at some point. So even if he's closer to a 43% shooter than an 8% shooter, the 8% shooter is what you got right now. And he's not doing anything that's convincing me that that's not the case. He's not enough of a plus in any other area, and he's a big enough minus in some other areas where it's becoming even harder to justify how he leads the score so much. Especially when Trout is playing well, when McAndrew is playing okay, when Green's playing all right. It's one thing to say, like, those other guys maybe don't give you some of the things that Mason theoretically could give you. But it's all theoretical right now because he ain't giving you any of it. So, you know, it's the question of how much more leash can a guy possibly have before he's got to take it. Fedor clearly, I really don't know what to think about this situation, man. It's one thing to say that a guy might not be ready, might not be in shape to play these games. It's another thing for that to justify him not playing at all, which is kind of, again, what happened today. So I'm just still kind of on the theory that it has to be a case of they don't feel comfortable running him out there yet because either they think it matters so much that he's not up to speed with the offense or he's just not looking that good. And I fear it's the latter. Today didn't give you a whole lot to go on. I don't think he did anything on defense that was noteworthy one way or the other. 2 turnovers and a 3. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to think. You have to trust the coaches are evaluating him correctly in practice. There's no reason not to trust that. But if the whole thing is really based on the theory of they didn't expect him to get cleared, which, first of all, I don't believe. Everyone got cleared. Everyone got cleared. The only person in all of NCAA that didn't get cleared is the kid on Nova. And it's not the same situation. So everyone in a similar situation got cleared at one time or another. So the thought that we really didn't think he was getting cleared, I either don't believe that or that's kind of a shame, because I think that's misguided at best. So again, and then you're left with the other options of, even if he's not up to game shape, if he's a good enough player, you find a way to run him out there when needed. And it's one thing to say you don't run a guy in completely cold for a set or something like that. That's fine. But you could probably have found a way today, right? Found a way to maybe try to generate some offense. So my worry is that what's happening is they're saying it's not that he's not ready. He's not good enough to be at the level of readiness he is and contribute. I find that hard to believe. I'll be the first one to say I'm not a scout. My playing knowledge is pretty limited, right? So I'm going to defer to other people, but everything I've seen on him, man, I like to think I watched enough basketball in my time. I like to think I have a decent enough eye for the game at this point. And I think I've backed that up, not to, throw ethos onto this. I think I've backed that up with some of the things I've said over the years, and I'm probably giving myself way too much credit and taking it a little too seriously. I'm just a guy talking about cricket basketball to 50 people once or twice a month. Everything you see about him says he should be a contributor, right? I don't think anyone would disagree his tape looks good. His tape against professional players looks good. His numbers against professional players look good. He was in the draft pool last year. He was a late pull from the draft pool last year. Clearly there is something there. And it seems to me like it should be clearly good enough for college basketball. And I don't mean that derogatory. But do they disagree? Or is it really one of the other things that I'm not totally sold on? So that's the question, because he was, again, basically not involved, right? For all intents and purposes, not involved. So that's kind of your roundup on your role players. King gave you a couple of good minutes off the bench again today. I think his spot minutes have been way better this year than last year, which is good, because there's a situation where you're rolling him out there as your starter next year. Like, I don't think it's likely, but there is definitely a world, right? I think it's very easy to see a world where we don't portal in a big that we think we should, and then all of a sudden King is playing 25 minutes as our big, right? So you have to prepare for that eventuality, and it looks better. I feel more confident about it than I did at this point last year, which is good. Maybe not than at this point 2 years ago, because at this point 2 years ago he had his little run there. We'll call it injured. So it's good to see from King. His minutes, I would say, are improving. He looks a little more confident out there. He looks a little more like he's in place. You're just never not going to call 36 minutes a game in a game like this. So that's fine. We know what we're doing with him, and I'm pretty comfortable with where he's at there. I hope he stays next year. I hope he's a contributor on the team. I'm more excited about it than I thought I would be, even though, he played 4 minutes tonight, and I'm basing it off of that. But yeah, this one, it just feels, Mr. Dennis's dad left this comment on the way out. Marquette was vulnerable tonight. You had a chance to pick off a quad 1A win on the road. Make no mistake about it. This would have been a resume builder. This is the kind of game you win it, and I start to say you should be favored to make the tournament. Right, this would have been a big deal, and you didn't get it, and that it happens, right? And we're kind of getting into the point now where the tournament math is really gonna start to matter. You had a chance at a quad 1A win tonight, like no two ways about it, and you don't get necessarily, you go into a team's barn like that, a team of that quality. The chance of that game being winnable isn't always there, right? The chance of it being winnable isn't a guarantee. That's a team that just went into the AMP and pumped Providence by 30. Like, not a great Providence team, but that's not really the point, right? Not just anybody's going to do that. So when you get those games, obviously you want to make them count. This is one of the things I get, pushback on for saying that sometimes you can't spoil a performance, and usually you can't spoil your own performances. You can't spoil a good performance, like against Villanova. Man, it would have really fucking sucked to lose that game when you shoot that well from 3 in the first half. This game, it sucks to lose it because you have a team. You never really had them on the ropes, but the point is you're not guaranteed to be in a game like this. You take that UConn game at Gamble last year. You're just never in that game, right? So it's never a guarantee that you're even going to be in the ball game. So when you are, you want to try and make it count. And any game against a top 25 team on the road is massively important. If you can win it, it doesn't really mean a whole lot if you lose it. Like, nothing is changing negatively from this game. It's just one that if you pick it off, great, right? The math really starts to work in your favor. And you don't get a whole lot of these chances. You will only get maybe 2 more chances at a game that's impactful. You got at UConn, which will be treated that way, and at St. John's, which you hope will be treated that way. Like, you hope they'll do enough good work, where that will be treated as a big deal. I think it will. But you got to win it still. And there aren't 2 games I feel less confident about on the schedule going forward than at St. John's and at UConn. You now feel like, to feel good on Bubble Day, on Selection Sunday, you kind of have to win one of those. Or you have to be perfect at home and pick off the middling road. You can probably afford 1 home loss on this season. And I don't think that's unreasonable. You're looking at it, you got 2 of the trickier games out of the way, right? Like, probably only Marquette and UConn are higher than the ones we've already played. Georgetown with a healthy Sorber could be a game. Xavier definitely could be a game, but I'd be more afraid of St. John's at home game. So you've got Marquette and UConn at home, probably have to win bowls to be feeling decent about the bubble. You can afford to lose one. You could afford to lose one if you do well on the road going forward. If you win, yeah, it's tough because 13-7. We were just talking about this, Mr. Dennis and I, as we were leaving the stadium. I've been operating under the assumption that 13-7 gets you to 19-12. You probably feel okay about yourself on Bubble Day. Yeah, I would have thought so. But looking at similar resumes from the past few years of teams that have probably finished even with better net numbers than we have, or than we are likely to this season, not sure if that's actually something you're going to feel too good about. I think that going 13-7 in the Big East will get you in. That your conference record in a power, if you go 13-7 in the Big East, I think you always get in. I would be interested to see if anyone has ever not gotten in, going 13-7 without a catastrophic loss. Because your win over Kansas isn't going to age like you beat the number one team in the country, and it's not going to be treated the same because you don't have Pop anymore. It'll still be a good win. Beating both UConn and Marquette, I feel very good about your chances as long as you don't blow anything. Beating one of UConn or St. John's on the road, you feel very good about. But your other option is you get one of the Marquette-UConn games, you hold firm at home and lose none of the other ones, and you have to probably you need to beat Butler on the road, and then you need one of the Villanova-Xavier games on the road, and beating all the West teams. You cannot slip up at Seton Hall, you cannot slip up at DePaul, who the hell is left? You can't slip up at Providence. Like, that has become a must-win game. Butler is probably a must-win game on the road. That's a tough ask. 11 a.m. at Hinkle. That team is not good. They're not terrible. So that's a tough ask. It's just, you needed to win the St. John's game for the math to even start mathing. I think we were minus 140 to miss the tournament before that game. I haven't checked if the line has moved much since then. If you lose that game and lose today, I think you would have been in deep, deep trouble. Like, big trouble. You would have been sitting at 1-3 in conference. You would have been sitting at 8-7? We're what, 9-6 now, 8-7? Yeah. So that would not have looked good. You're now in a position where if you go win at Butler on set, and I'm struggling to remember if there's a game between now and then. You go win that game, you're in a decent spot compared to what you could have expected going in. The loss at Georgetown's a killer. They might not be that bad this year, but losing that game and losing it the way we did is a killer. And we didn't do a big post-game thing after that game, but man, that was bad. That was real bad. So yeah, you had a chance, vulnerable opponent today. But when you get these chances, man, you're playing a top 15 whatever team on the road. You need your leaders to step up. You need your best players to step up. And the story of the game, ours really kind of did today. They did in places. Again, I thought Colt's defense was good. Maybe not his best defensive game, but with what he was being asked to do, I don't think that's unreasonable. It's certainly not a favorable matchup for him. Ashworth's passing was better. Less turnovers was good. One turnover up until the last few minutes. There might have been another one. That's good. He maybe forced a couple of shots, not so good. His percentage is not so good. Called funny, not so good. They execute those things. Maybe we've got a different result today, and that's the kind of thing you would have needed them to do to pull off a win. So that's the story of the game, basically, is your best two players would be the first ones to tell you that they probably deserve a bit of the blame for the way today panned out. I think a couple of, I don't want to call them mistakes from the coaching tonight, a couple of strange rotations, a couple of guys not getting their heads organized on defense, and then a couple of strange zone decisions. So all that put together, and it is what it is to some degree. That, okay, you lost by 8 to a top 15 team on the road. Yeah, you can't feel too bad about that. It just sucks because it was there for the taking, and it's, again, like I'm the first one to tell people it's okay to be disappointed when you have a chance to do something and you don't do it. Like, that would have been a real nice win. That would have been a feather in the cap. Marquette didn't play super well, but it doesn't matter. Right, that's there are going to be those days. The best teams will have those days. You want to catch them while they are, and even on those days, good teams won't always be able to beat the great teams. So that's a little bit of what happened today. I think we're still struggling to find out exactly how good this great team can be with the rotations we have right now. And it just very much still feels like we're still trying to figure out how we incorporate all this stuff happening sort of at the same time. Like we're dealing with regression amongst existing players. We're dealing with a new player that apparently we didn't think was going to be eligible. We're dealing with the loss of one of your top scorers and learning how to play without him. You're learning how to play defense. You're trying to implement defenses week to week against some of these different teams to cope with what we've got available. Having only one on-ball defender really on the team. All of this stuff is up in the air at the same time, and they're trying to manage it, and it just feels like we still haven't gotten to our identity yet this year, and it's something where you kind of got to find it sooner rather than later. At this point, just the nature of what's left on the schedule, slips are going to be punished on Selection Sunday. For every slip you make, you have to go out and win one of the games you're not expecting. You have to either sweep UConn and Marquette at home, or win at St. John's or at UConn on the road. So you have 3 opportunities to make up for your slips this year, and ideally you want to have one more game kicked off than a slip. At this point, it feels like the Georgetown game might not end up being that if Georgetown can get their way onto the right side of the ball. I didn't see how they finished up against Xavier tonight. But if they can be a top 5 team in the Big East, is maybe not crazy to say for them. If they end up being that, then that wouldn't be considered a slip. It wouldn't be considered a resume-affecting loss. Your metrics might even bounce back a little bit if they start getting respectably treated by the metrics as well. So there's a lot of balls in the air. It's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of urgency, because not only are you a bubble team, but you're a bubble team with very little room to breathe already. You've got 16 basketball games left in the season. You can probably reasonably afford 6 losses. And even that maybe doesn't put you in the best spot. A few gimmies, ahead on your schedule. You got home games, Seton Hall, DePaul. Should be gimmies. A home game against Providence is kind of looking like a gimme. Home game against Butler should be fine. Home game against Georgetown, probably fine. And then you got you really ought to win them. You got at Seton Hall, at DePaul, home against Xavier, not quite in that category. Away against Butler, not quite in that category. You win all of those games and then pick off 3 of the remaining 7, you'll probably be okay. So, again, there's the St. John's game was the big game in terms of making the math math. The math maths right now. You just have to do your job the rest of the way. If you get to 20 and 11, I don't even want to say probably in, because you just don't know what the metrics are going to look like. Like a Pitt team that went 22 and 11, I don't even know if they were on the flat bubble last year. If they were in the next 4 first 4. I don't even remember. But they didn't make it in, right? So it's going to be a consideration of the strength of the conference and the strength of the metrics. So it's kind of too early to say, you need this record to get in. It might very well come down to, are they going to put an 12th SEC team, a 10th Big Ten team, or are they going to put the 4th, 5th Big East team? And it's probably a situation where what happened last year actually works in your favor a little bit, that they might feel like they owe the Big East one. If it's looking like another 3-bid Big East, if Villanova doesn't get there, if Georgetown doesn't get there, Xavier doesn't get there, and we're the only hope for the conference's 4th bid, I can see a world where they float it to us, and people are really upset that we show up in Dayton. I can definitely see that world. But yeah, the truth is, gotta win the gimmies and pick some off after that, right? You have to win the games you're supposed to win the rest of the way. This wasn't a game you were supposed to win, so you can rest pretty easy on that, knowing that you showed enough today where you don't say this is a team that definitely can't compete with the upper echelon, right? The road game at MSG, I don't think it's going to go well, but today makes me think maybe it could. The road game at Gamble, I don't think it's going to go well. Maybe it could, right? So that's what you're looking for. Pick them off, win what you have to, win the ones you have to, pick off a few that you're maybe not supposed to, or toss-ups, right? That's going to be the story of the season. Just get back to the tournament, man. Just get there. Get it home. That's what this season is at this point. It's a salvage effort, and it's still be a good season for a lot of programs. I'm not losing sight of that, but you really would have hoped to send Kalkbrenner out with better. You got a catastrophic injury. All right, that happens. I don't know how much higher our ceiling was with Pop. Maybe you're talking at 8 seed, 7 seed. That would have been nice, I think. Yeah, you're looking at a salvage. And, again, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. Sometimes you play the hand you're dealt. Sometimes you lose a game you're not expecting to. That's the nature of sports, especially this one. The margins are just so thin. The bubble, they're always thin. St. John's last year was one of the best 30 probably teams in the country, and they didn't get in. I'm not sure this team is one of the best 30 teams in the country. Actually, I'm pretty sure they're not, but could still very well wind up playing themselves on the right side of the bubble. Could wind up becoming that kind of team. I'm not going to rule that out either. Long way to go. I'm driving, so I wanted to talk through this game probably more than is necessary. I think there are more reasons for optimism than pessimism after this game tonight. Just would have been really nice to win that one. So that's Dr. Chim signing off. Creighton Marquette, Jays fall 79-17.